Hello, everyone. Greetings. Good evening, everyone. It's with added delight that we're in San Francisco, the Churchill Club, that is, for a second time this week. And it indicates truly that it's a priority for the club and for the board of directors to organize more events up here. And we are thrilled to have an amazing program for you this evening. For the benefit of the podcasting community, welcome members and friends to the Churchill Club. The event this evening is the CIO Agenda 2006, Building the New IT. First of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors for this evening's event. CA, thank you very much. And Satyam Computer Services, thank you. As you know, corporate sponsorship is hugely important to the club, and that's what kind of keeps us going, so thank you to one and all. If you're not already a member of the club, there's never been a better time to join. If you take your newsletter, there's a piece of paper in here, and you can just fill it out and become a member tonight. We'd love to have you as a regular member of the Churchill Club, and you enjoy a number of great benefits, including members-only events, some of which are on the horizon very shortly. Thursday, May 11, a conversation with Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer takes place in Santa Clara, and it'll be a pleasure to welcome Steve Ballmer back to the Churchill Club stage. Steve will be joined by one of Silicon Valley's most respected investors and pundits, and one of the great friends of the Churchill Club, Roger McNamee. They'll be in conversation on stage. That's Thursday, May 11th at lunch in Santa Clara. That's happening on May 11th in the South Bay. Here in San Francisco, concurrently on the same day, you can attend the May 11th third annual USA Today Technology CEO Roundtable, where we'll welcome executives from Helio, AOL, Lucent, and Sprint Nextel to discuss communications business, the age of voice over IP, Wi-Fi, 3G, and again, this is a special members-only event, once again, on May 11th. So we're all going to be working pretty hard on May 11th to get to both of those events at the same time, but it should be fun. More information on upcoming programs, membership information, etc., is either in your newsletter or just go to your search engine of choice and type in Churchill Club, and you'll be right there in milliseconds. And now on to tonight's program. We're pleased and delighted to welcome tonight's moderator back to the Churchill Club stage. Dave Margulies is an analyst and consultant focused on enterprise technology. Now, this is the fourth CIO roundtable, and Dave has led all those discussions for the Churchill Club. We're delighted and fortunate to have Dave not only as moderator tonight, but also as a Churchill Club board member and with equal pleasure as president-elect of the Churchill Club. It's my great honor and privilege to welcome Dave Margulies and tonight's panel. Ladies and gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much, Raymond, and I'm excited to be here moderating another one of these CIO agenda discussions. Thanks for the Churchill Club folks who put this together. As Raymond said, this is the fourth year we've done it, and it's the one I'm most excited about. The past 3 years were pretty tough for CIOs. They were fighting to keep the ship afloat. They were downsizing. They were complying with Sarbanes-Oxley. They were fighting worms and viruses. They were trying to convince their CEOs that IT mattered. That was kind of 2001 to 2005. And suddenly it feels to me, and I spend a lot of time with CIOs, that we're coming out of the woods, that CIOs are sort of getting ahead of things again. They're more able to participate strategically in their businesses. At the same time, there's been a lot of change in IT. It's moving much faster than ever. It's more outsourced. It's more on the hook for business results and accountability. For the purpose of tonight's discussion, we're calling this the new IT. We have 4 leading CIOs here to tell us what this new IT looks like, if in fact it exists, and their priorities for the coming year. We'll also be doing a special technology lightning round at 7:45. So if any of you watch Jim Cramer on CNBC, we're going to do that, but for technology. Before I introduce our CIOs, just get a sense of the audience. Can I see a show of hands? How many of you work at a technology company that sells to IT or to CIOs? Can you raise your hand? So that's a lot, okay.
We're never going to get out of here.
I think you're right.
He said, we're never going to get out of here. How many of you are investors? Okay, a little bit fewer. How many IT professionals? Do we have any IT professionals in the room? Good, okay, so we have a few. All right, so let me quickly introduce our panelists. Geir Ramleth is CIO of Bechtel Corporation. Geir heads the company's IS&T organization, which he joined in 2002 after serving as chairman and CEO of Zurich-based Digiplex SA. Prior to that, while working for Bechtel, Geir led the acquisition of assets used to build Genuity, an internet service business. As CEO of Genuity, he built the company into an industry leader before it was sold to GTE in 1997. Prior to Bechtel and Genuity, he was director of Oracle Corporation's applications consulting practice and held positions with PageMart and Pactel Personal Communications. I'm actually going to go out of order here. John Johnson is CIO of Intel Corporation, a little company in San Jose. He's responsible for leading Intel's global IT organization, providing capabilities to over 100,000 employees in over 50 countries. He also directs Intel's Corporate Emergency Operations Center, so if your pager goes off, we'll know what's happening.
That's right.
John joined Intel in 1981, has held a wide range of positions, including field applications engineer, regional technical specialist, business development manager for fault-tolerant microprocessor technology, and marketing applications manager. In 1992, he became director of worldwide technical marketing, and in 1999 joined the IT organization. He was appointed co-CIO in 2005 and CIO in 2006. Randy Spratt, to John's left, is CIO of McKesson Corporation. He's responsible for all technology initiatives. He's been with McKesson for over 18 years, most recently as Chief Process Officer for the company's medical software and services division based in Georgia. He also managed business development, IT, and strategic planning for that division. Prior to joining McKesson, Randy held executive positions, including COO at Advanced Laboratory Systems, which was acquired by HBOC in '96. He then took on responsibility for HBOC's lab systems business, and HBOC was acquired by McKesson in 1999. To Randy's left is Lars Rabbe, CIO of Yahoo. Lars is responsible for overall strategic direction and execution of Yahoo's global IT infrastructure, apps, networks, and desktops. Prior to joining Yahoo, he spent 30 years developing and managing large enterprise systems, most recently at Redback Networks, where he was CIO, and before that at Lucent, where he was CIO of 4 different divisions. Before that, he was a VP at Fidelity, a director of IS at Next Computer, so you got to work for Steve Jobs, and held a variety of IT management positions at CG Computer Services, Financial Card Systems. I'd also like to mention that there's a lot of additional biographical information about Lars available on the internet on his Yahoo 360 profile, including the fact that his favorite TV shows are CSI, Crossing Jordan, Formula One and WRC races, and The West Wing, but only the pre-2004 West Wings. We can get into that later in the discussion if we run out of tech stuff to talk about. So let's just jump right in. I'd love to ask each of you to start by giving us some context. Take a minute or two and give us kind of the soundbite version of your company's business strategy. And then at a high level, what are the key things IT is trying to do to support that strategy? You know, just the highlights, and we can dive deeper later. Anybody want to start?
Looking at me? Well, it's kind of interesting when you go around it. Not everybody knows who Bechtel is. We're an engineering and construction company. The people you ask, do you know who we are? They either laugh at you and say, sure I do, or they kind of say, no, I have no earthly idea who you are. So it's never anything in between. It's kind of like I think you are something, but we are. Our strategy is kind of interesting. You know, our real strength is to manage complexity and manage that complexity at kind of an acceptable risk level, because these projects are very, very large capital projects, and you as a executor of those projects take on a lot of inherent risks. So what we have...
These are construction projects.
Any construction,
Any
engineering and construction, you take on a lot of risk. Now, I'm not talking about IT projects, I'm talking about our core business. So what we do is we kind of say, okay, fine, we want to manage complexity at an acceptable risk, and then we divide that into various business units in various things like power, oil and gas, and everybody that kind of looks at the news or newspapers know that oil is going through the roof, and therefore then building capital budgets for that industry is very good for the moment. Same thing with mining and metals. We can see that those kind of commodities are also going up and so. But going through all these business units, what we have then as a challenge from IS&T is to find commonality. Finding commonality where we then can say we don't need to do the various slices of how we operate as almost like a holding company in that industry. And I would say that over the last few years, to answer some of those challenges that you mentioned earlier, that was to drive that commonality as high as possible, so that we could drive out cost of our business. We are in a very capital-intense business, but a very, very low profit margin. We are down there competing with kind of who is highest, the grocery chains or the engineering and construction business. And therefore, you have to then drive out anything you can of cost, and that is a big piece of the strategy for the company as well as us, to be competitive in the marketplace.
Oh, thank you. That's a great summary. Lars?
Well, I hope everybody knows who Yahoo is and what it is that we do and what we have done. In the recent earnings announcement, we talked about some of the metrics, and on an average month, we have over 500 million unique users accessing one or more of our services. And that is a significant challenge in terms of how we actually support that and how we run the systems to make that possible. From an infrastructure point of view, I think one of the saving graces that I have is that the company was built on massive scalability from the very beginning, which means we have a very low-cost infrastructure that we can replicate and scale globally without a lot of problems. So my problems lie mostly on the back end in terms of how do I create an application and systems infrastructure that can span the globe, can accommodate new businesses, and mostly to accommodate integration of acquisitions very rapidly. So that is really what we're aiming most at. The business expansion that we're seeing really doesn't have a lot of reflection back on the IT back end. It does have a lot to do with how we actually run the individual services we provide to our end users, and we continue to expand and scale the network of data centers and backbone network globally in order to support that. So those are definite challenges on an ongoing basis.
Thanks. Randy?
Well, McKesson is not exactly a household name. Many of you probably have not heard of McKesson, the 14th largest company in America with revenues of about $80 billion. We fundamentally have two business models. On the one hand, we are the world's largest vendor of information systems to the healthcare market, physician offices, acute care providers, and home care settings. And we're also the world's largest drug dealer. And I dare say that more people are drug users than even hit Yahoo, probably. Actually, those may be related. And just to give you a sense of it, we ship about, or we take orders for about $10 million worth of drugs an hour.
10 million.
$10 million of drugs an hour.
Wow.
And obviously the IT infrastructure that supports that, taking in orders from everywhere from Walmart to your local physician office and assuring a 99.99% fill rate the next day of the drugs that you want to go pick up at your pharmacy is a very large part of our business. On the IT side, we're the rough equivalent, I suppose, of SAP to the financial world, but our software goes into the healthcare market. And our goal is to provide the infrastructure, the information interchange, and the fundamental information technologies that allow the healthcare system to operate more effectively at lower cost and higher quality. And we have seen remarkable progress on that across the industry in the last 4 or 5 years as the information standards begin to mature and the technology becomes deployable across large scales.
Right. John?
And when you look at Intel, I think many people recognize Intel as a microprocessor company, and we make a lot of other products, memory products and support circuits and things that go around the microprocessor. In the last couple of years, though, we've had a significant shift to, one, recognize that really moving into a digital world that where many things are based on digital technology. And we're moving our company to a platform structure where we try to provide platforms that support things in the consumer world, things in the business world, and things in areas that we haven't participated in, such as the healthcare industry. We have an initiative in that space. So as you look at what we're doing moving forward, there is a shift, I think, to a broader set of consumer and business capabilities and applications for our products at a platform level. And in fact, this week we just launched a new brand, another platform brand for the business desktop that is a significant change in what we're going to provide moving forward for computers that sit on the desktop.
This is vPro.
This is the vPro announcement that happened on Monday, and it's pretty exciting because it's not an incremental change. It's a fairly revolutionary change to what we are going to be able to do in that space. And we have other initiatives that I think you'll see over time that follow that are of a similar level. From an IT perspective, I think the challenge for us is, Intel's spread into a broad set of markets, both mature markets around the world and emerging markets, and we have to be able to support the efforts across the world. And also recognize that Intel's moving more and more into commodity product levels, which put pressure on supporting a lower cost manufacturing model, a different model than the high margin microprocessor business that we've seen and enjoyed in the past. So the business model is starting to change, I think, a little bit for us.
Interesting. Well, that's a great introduction. So let's talk about this new IT. Does it exist? And to be honest, this is just a title we made up because you need a sexy catchphrase for an event like this. But I want to ask you, what's new this year compared to that 2001-2005 period of cost-cutting, consolidation, and compliance? When I asked him this over the phone, John said you really need a glass of wine to have that conversation. So we've had our glass of wine. If
Perhaps not enough.
Maybe not enough. If there's one thing that's sort of new now that's fundamentally changed about IT or that you see changing in the next year or so, what is it? Anybody want to tackle that one?
Well, I'll share a conversation I had with our CEO, Paul Ottolini, as we talked about what we're going to do moving forward with our IT space. And I think the fundamental message was we want to be able to conduct business efficiently and easily. The systems that provide the capabilities, the business process, the workflow process that people use, we want to make that as simple as we can and have it work consistently around the world. So there's more of a focus, at least for us, to look at the business systems in the IT space that in terms of workflow and business process and systems, such that they enable the sales force, the marketing people, the engineering people, the manufacturing people to be able to get their work done as quickly and smoothly as they can.
Okay.
Well, let's see. I'm new to IT this year, so I suppose that's one new element of IT. I actually came through my career in the role of software development and development of IT systems for resale, and ran several businesses around that capability. and was asked to come here to San Francisco to head up the IT operations of McKesson, fundamentally to bring to the role a business perspective. The need was very clear to begin to shift out of the model where IT was a utility, where the essential measure of IT was cost, and begin to move into a model where IT was a business within a business, a service-oriented business with a high degree of intimacy with business units, establishing strong relations with the business units, getting involved in their strategic planning and their 3-year planning, and to begin to develop the capability of assisting the business units in deploying information technology to help drive their top line, and at the same time bring business rigors to the function.
So it's sort of a new business savvy, business focus, business outlook.
Yes, and I think if my contacts that I've begun to form in the CIO community are representative, more and more we're seeing the selection of people in that role around business skills and business savvy and strategic planning capabilities, and less around technology backgrounds, although I have heard of Intel.
So let me try to cause trouble here for a minute. I mean, I've been seeing CIOs go to finance and come from finance, and go to operations and come from operations, and so on. It seems like the CIO has become just another C-level executive, well-rounded general manager. But is there some value to technology as the differentiator? I mean, do you think we'll see the pendulum swing back to the point where CIOs say, well, the only thing that separates me from the CFO is the fact that I really understand the technology and the architecture and how to put together this horizontal stuff? I mean, how far do you think this business trend will go?
Well, it's a lot like comparing Bechtel to Intel. Bechtel has a business model. They deliver a certain set of services. They deliver a competency to the marketplace, as does Intel. Would the two CEOs be interchangeable? Perhaps, but the two functions aren't. And the thing that distinguishes the two functions is their core competency and their ability to effectively deploy their competency against the set of problems that their organization faces. So, of course, technology matters, but more than that, the successful use of technology to solve the business's problems matters.
Yeah, I would just add, I think that as I look at the systems that we're putting in place, many of them come with a very wide set of features. And the reality is when you start to look at the business requirements that are needed to conduct business, there's really only a couple things in that pick list that matter. And I think if you don't have a little bit of an understanding of both the business requirements and business process, as well as the technology, you can invest a lot of money that you frankly aren't going to get much return on. So I think you have to have kind of a combination of both skills in order to be successful.
So there's the business savvy. Is the new IT kind of slimmer and on a perpetual diet? Just to take a poll, how many of your budgets are flat? Are your budgets flat or up this year, and do you expect them to be flat or up next year?
Started out up, but it keeps going down. I don't know where it's going to end.
Ours is flat.
Yours is flat. What do you think for next year? Flat?
Probably.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit of an uptick because of some of the business units doing very well, but it will be very negligible.
So my budgets are up. My situation is very different from the other three gentlemen here because I'm in a high-growth company where IT systems are still not mature. I arrived 3 years ago as the first CIO for Yahoo and has pretty much had to build a lot of the systems infrastructure. So we're still very much in investment mode, which means also that there's a conscious decision on behalf of the company to invest in an IT infrastructure and continue to invest in that. So it's really not very symptomatic of the industry in general. It's more a reflection of where are we in our business cycle and where are we in the maturity of the overall systems. But we are definitely investing at this point.
I find the discussion about budget fascinating because If you were talking to business leaders, you wouldn't ask that question. You'd ask if our profits were up.
Are your profits up?
And so the way we would measure our profits
Keep going.
We'll take that as a maybe.
would be contribution or margin expansion. So we look at per unit costs, or we've just begun to look at per unit costs. And for me, the discussion is, are we driving per unit costs down, which creates additional capital that can be deployed in investment areas. So while the company is growing dramatically, we're trying not to measure IT as a fixed cost. We're trying to measure IT in a unit cost, such as whatever it costs to manage an Intel server, or what it costs to deploy telephony to a user, etc.
And partially that's because you're competing with all these other external sources now, right? Outsourcing whoever it is who the business unit could buy from other than you, that has their price list, and at some point the execs will look at you and say, well, why can we get it, should we get it cheaper extra? I mean, that's a change that sort of happened, right?
Like any business, we need to be aware of the competition. We need to price our services competitively, and we need to provide equal or better quality and a relationship with the end user, just like every vendor in the room here.
Yeah, I look at outsourcing as one of the options that I have to deliver the services and the capabilities that are needed. It's just one of the tools available, whether I do it as an internal capability or I do it as a outsourced capability.
But you're really asking the question whether we add significantly more value than any external provider. And I think that one of the big value adds that the internal IT department always can provide is the level of integration between services. And I would like to believe that we always have a significant edge over any external provider in doing that.
And if you then talk about cost, they have to show that they can find a different economy of scale than we can do internally. We could not find that, so we do today very, very little outsourcing, because we're finding in most of the areas where we really need to do some specific work, we can find that economy of scale already internally, and therefore we don't go outside. A little bit for the same reason you're saying, hey, we know what we're doing. Now I'm saying that, and at the same time we do some offshoring and some stuff for some programming, but that's more on the swing of the kind of taking off the peaks, not for the core level. That is kind of an augmentation to what you then can do already internally.
So that's like staff augmentation,
Yes.
sorts of stuff.
Yeah. But if you're talking plain labor arbitrage, I agree you could do that just as well inside the company as going outside. If you're a global company, if you know where you can find the talent, you can go and have the job done where you need it done, and you can drive cost out of your organization by doing that.
So let's talk about the globalization. You mentioned globalization. That's sort of something new that CIOs have top of their list right now, right? You mentioned you were doing something in Arabic the other day, Lars. What was that? You mentioned you were doing something, you had to do something in Arabic the other day.
Yes. Well, that's when we look at the products, right? The products that we provide really have to be used everywhere. And we really create very open products. We make it possible for other people to supplement what we do. And we had the conversation we had was about how we said, well, what if you want to do instant messenger in Arabic? Is that something that you want to let somebody else do, or is it something we should do? Well, it's a unique problem because it's right to left, not left to right. And is that something we need to build as a core function that we want to do ourselves, or do we want to let somebody else come up with that technology to do that?
What did you decide?
We have not decided that one yet. That was a problem of the day when we talked.
So, Geir, yeah?
Well, you asked if a CIO had to wrestle with some of the challenges around globalization, and I think we do. We have to do that both from statutory requirements, such as export rights and that kind of stuff, that normally we didn't necessarily have to get as involved with. The other one that I have wrestled a lot with is the whole concept of the respect for intellectual property. As you move your systems to cultures and nations that have a different view on the value of intellectual property and the rights around those, and there are no rule of the land that will actually back you up on this, it becomes quite challenging when you then say that actually the intellectual property I have either in the way I execute the work, so my work processes and so on, and the supporting applications below that, and maybe included in that is the data that those store, that also is then a common kind of free-for-all for whoever that deals with that. And I think that is something that at least we are struggling a lot with. How do you actually deal with that? And I think that is even coupled with the change of how the vendors we deal with intellectual property. If you take the kind of the most conservative and stoic applications, let's say an SAP, versus where you have in an open source environment, the two of those environments have very different view on where that intellectual property actually should sit and how it should be valued and how we should be paying for that. So it goes up and down within the industry of different models, and then it goes geographically that way. And I think that is something that we will be struggling with for a few years to come, of where we then want to position ourselves in that.
So let me ask about this business of product. And one of the things I've been hearing lately is that CIOs have been getting more involved in the product. Where for a few years you were kind of run the utility, give us the right unit costs and price points and support, operational excellence. But I'm hearing more and more now, CIOs are getting pulled in. Oh, we've got a technology enabler product. Oh, we have this huge group of people that are technology experts. Is that a trend? Is that happening? And how does that change what you have to do day to day? Are any of you getting pulled into the product?
Well, for Intel's IT organization, we've been to some degree and to a large degree involved in product planning and product development for a long time. So in the enterprise product area, the servers, the business clients, handheld clients, et cetera, our information security people, our management folks that are engineering and have the engineering expertise and manageability, et cetera, have been heavily involved in looking over the shoulder of our design and our product planning people to make sure that, does this really make sense in an enterprise? Is it something we would buy? Why or why not? Is the information security model sensible and really solve problems, or is it just feature and benefit list? So we actually get involved in proof of concept activity as a product starts to move towards production, and really try to do as much as we can with the expertise we have in the organization to support the the business groups.
So you have to eat your own dog food. I know you have that too,
Well,
Lars, right?
If you talk about product, what is our product? Is the product a liquefied natural gas plant, or is it the way that you actually get that one built? Are we as IT, into the product of how you actually do the process of how to bring 500 gallons of gas down to 1 gallon? No, we are not. But are we involved with the product development of how we can execute that project better? Yes. And the way we have done that is that we have worked a lot on marrying the actual work process with the underlying applications. And we have a much stronger relationship today between our IT people and actually the execution unit of our business. And I have to say a lot of that is driven by our adaptation of Six Sigma. Six Sigma takes a broader view on that, and therefore you then can be brought into the table for that set of products.
What I've found also in other companies is that very often product management people think very much in terms of features, and what IT would bring to a discussion of defining new products would be the angle of supportability, maintainability, and so on. And I found that to be very useful and create a great synergy between product development and IT in several companies. My situation right now is that I do get to eat a lot of my own cooking, and I do believe that that's a very valuable thing, because it also creates the interaction between the R&D part of the company and the IT part. And I truly believe that if you can actually, like we can do in our company, create an internal test bed for some of your new products and shake them down that way and really get fast initial feedback, it will create a much better product.
Okay.
And for us, obviously on the information system side, for the resale side, IT is the product, and we're intimately involved not only in the development process and the technologies behind it, but also in hosting the ASP environments and remote environments. On the distribution side, it is the act of distributing product that really is our value. And more than ever, the ability to deploy technologies all along the supply chain, from online ordering to mobile picking off of shelves, and all the way through the supply chain down to the warehouses, including capabilities like RFID tagging and the new drug authentication or drug pedigree program that many states are legislating. You simply can't accomplish that job without integrating IT into the planning and the business operations of those functions.
So all of your products really technology enabled to some extent. You're not just doing plumbing, you're driving the core business. Well, let's switch gears. As you do less development internally, vendor management becomes a bigger part of your job. So let's talk about vendors for a couple minutes and how you handle them. This is always kind of a fun discussion. What are the key issues for you in managing your software vendors, say, these days? You know, there's been a lot of consolidation. You sort of have these big companies, Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, IBM. How do you deal with that? What are some of the challenges?
Well, I think for us, our biggest problem with vendor management is ankle biting. We have offices all over North America, all over the world, and there's a tremendous amount of gnawing at the base of our organizations as vendors attempt to penetrate the IT strategies in small local offices. And so you'll find one vendor gets a foothold in one office, one gets a foothold in another office, another somewhere else, and soon the capabilities become large enough to be standards, and then we have competing standards, and then we have jihads and holy war.
Sounds familiar.
So we've given up trying to build fences, and instead we're trying to build relationships and open up our strategic planning process to the vendors and meet with our key vendors each year, go through the major programs where we're going to spend a lot of money and ask them to come to the table with their capabilities and try to head off the low-level penetration by bringing their attention to where the real money is.
So for you, it's sort of the smaller vendors who are coming in.
Oh, no.
The big ones too, they're a headache?
No, the big ones too, and it's fun to watch because usually you then get into who gets the commission. The one that owns the relationship with the corporation or the one that's out in the field. But it is large and small. It's all up and down the chain. And of course, as we integrate our IT capabilities with our resell capabilities, we also run into the vendor model of sell to versus sell through, where they keep their sales forces and their pricing separate, and we're trying to gain leverage and combine them. So we're constantly running into those battles as well.
What about you, Lars?
I've had that problem in spades in prior companies. I don't really have it that much today. I would say that for me, the consolidation that's taking place is actually a good thing. I would like my application vendors, my software vendors to solve some of the problems for me. And one of the biggest problems is always integration. So the bigger footprint they can have and the more advantage I can take of that footprint and leverage it, the better off I will be. I can use my scarce resources on more value-added things. So that to me is a good thing. So I'm an Oracle user. The merge of Oracle and Siebel means that I don't have to, a few years down the road, don't have to think of that problem anymore. I don't have the sniping as you were guessing. In my case, it's more the smaller vendors that come in the back doors and that we have to deal with, but not the big ones.
So do you not worry about getting locked in? I mean, if you have Oracle or SAP at some point, you know, they own you, right?
Yes.
I mean, do you feel like you have any leverage or power against them, or you just have to take what their roadmap says, and what do you think?
I still think we have leverage. I mean, some of it may be illusory in the sense that it may not be realistic to really go for an alternative, but there is always an option. You can always do it, but companies have done it.
Well, I think that some of the large vendors have a tough time changing with what is going on. Take the extreme of buying an SAP license versus actually licensing Salesforce.com. Two very, very different models. And I wish that we could have seen some of the larger vendors modernize their ways of doing commercial deals, such as licensing, before they started consolidating. Because I think that I'm a little afraid of what you just alluded to, is that we will just see them actually become more difficult to deal with rather than easier to deal with. Not necessarily by plan, but just by the default that the competition is not as big in the marketplace to drive them to be more innovative. So I am a little bit cautious on it. I am not sure where this is going to drive us. With all the small vendors in the audience, and I assume that they are not all Oracle and SAP, I have about 15 to 20 unsolicited calls a day from some of you. And the likelihood, we track all this, and I'm sorry to say I've never bought from one of the unsolicited directly, or it has ever led to anything. So my challenge to you guys is find a different model, because the thing is, we don't even think about what you're saying. We're just trying to figure out how to get you off the phone, or how do I respond to the email nice enough so that I am not too rude. And I think you have to find a different model for how to reach us. And I don't know what it is, by the way. I don't have a suggestion, but I'm saying the one that is today isn't working well for the smaller ones. Going back again,
well, let me interrupt for a sec. So you hear this complaint about Salesforce since they came up, that they didn't even bother going to IT. They just sold to some sales manager in a regional office, and they started using it, and now IT has to deal with it. Is that a good way to
Well, is it good as a CIO? No, because we don't use Salesforce.com. These guys have a lot of customers. When we send out our customer review or survey every year, we send it out to 400 people. So that's it. We hope to get 250 back. But Salesforce, I think the model has a lot of value to it, because it gets selected by the people that actually have the pain point, that being the Salesforce of how they are going to do their job, rather than get this kind of hey, we know what's good for you. You know, eat your vegetables, it's good for you. You know, that's kind of an IT-driven approach. And I don't think that works as well of getting the buy-in from the stakeholders and the users of it as a Salesforce.com. But it has different challenges, and therefore, I think IT need to change. But by the entrance of Salesforce.com and what it can do for the user base, it has really drawn a lot of attention to our group internally to see how can we emulate what they are doing right. How can they develop, I believe they are now up to either version number 19 or 20 in a matter of the last 4 years. We could never do that under the main traditional ways of operating software. You could just not do it. You would be bogged down by it. So how can we learn from these companies? How can we learn to be more agile and more responsive to the businesses so that they maybe don't go and buy Salesforce.com? I'm not saying they shouldn't, but we then get more of an inclusive purchasing than this kind of rogue activity that you referred to.
Interesting. Randy, what's your take on the vendor landscape?
Well,
I'm sorry, you already told us it's the ankle biter thing. Now let's go to John.
I actually want to hear the answer to this question.
We could hear it one more time and see if it was the same.
We've solved the problem of the deluge of vendor calls. We send them all to Bechtel.
Yeah.
But in terms of the landscape, I'm also very much in favor of the ongoing consolidation, because in the end, the whole industry faces some fundamental issues about the amount of R&D that is being put into providing satisfactory solutions. And the more vendors there are in a space, the more R&D is being spent on identical capabilities. And the more we consolidate that, the faster the industry can move ahead to really deploy effective integration and effective capabilities for the business. Now, you do run a risk of getting locked in to a loser in those wars, or to predatory pricing. And I think the only answer to that, again, as with any business, is to make sure that you've got good executive contacts and that you can work at a level above, am I making quota this quarter, and talk about the effect of the vendor's policies on your business and reach an accommodation
They
at
need
that
to
level.
remain competitive.
Exactly. Because sooner or later, those practices will get driven out of the industry, one way or the other.
What do you think, John, about the software vendor landscape?
Well, it's actually, as I was listening to everyone talk, I have a somewhat different problem with the suppliers community. Many of our suppliers are large customers. And so our sales force always has a better idea on who I should be selecting. And I get a little bit of help from our CEO from time to time as well. So, you know,
So you've got one of everything, in other words.
no, I actually try to avoid that. I actually agree with the consolidation approach. It's the right thing to do from a cost management standpoint, and actually just being able to manage the environment and make changes in the environment. But it gets to be a challenge. We have to paint a very bright stripe between our IT procurement activities and our Intel customer activities that go on. And when I get too close to that line, it creates issues for us, so we try to avoid that.
Okay, interesting. All right, so we've hit our technology lightning round time, so we're going to pick up the pace. Imagine we're on TV, there's lots of sound effects. I'm going to read a list of technologies one by one. I'm going to ask each of you, going down the line, to give it a letter grade, A, B, or C, based on how much you care about it, how high a priority it is for you. So software as a service, we want to, we've already talked about that. SOA, A, B, or C?
B.
B?
B.
A.
B.
Okay. And we're going to come back to the good ones and find out why. Virtualization.
Virtualization, probably an A.
I'll give it a B.
A.
A.
Okay. Open source.
B plus.
That wasn't one of the choices.
Were you going to use that one?
2.73.
Yeah.
A plus.
On the IT resale side, A. On the infrastructure distribution side, C.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Or
Open source.
open source, a B.
B. Mobile applications.
A plus.
A on the resale side, B on the infrastructure side.
Okay. A.
In general, I would say on a big scale a C, but in certain key places it could be an A.
Okay. Collaboration.
Oh, for us it's an A.
A plus.
B.
A plus plus.
All right. Enterprise search.
Be careful now.
Let me think for a minute.
Is this content search or searching for jobs?
Search in general.
Search in general.
Well, enterprise
I think it's a B going to an A.
B going to an A?
I'll give it a solid B.
I think I can only say A.
I think it's like Intel, B, but probably increasing.
Okay. RFID.
C.
A on both sides.
Okay.
C.
C.
Okay. Voice over IP.
That's a B going to an A for me.
Yeah.
In pockets, it's an A.
A.
It's an A.
Okay. Business intelligence.
A.
Oxymoron.
A.
Probably a B.
Okay. Microsoft Vista.
Ooh.
I realize this is political. I'll skip you. Randy?
How do you really feel? We are patiently waiting.
Okay.
Inside B, outside A.
I would say C. I'm not looking for translucent screens at this point. So.
Okay. And finally, Web 2.0 technology. So this is the whole Ajax, blogs, user-created, all the Web 2.0 stuff. A, B, or C for the enterprise, for your enterprise.
I don't think they've completed the course yet, so Jury's still out on that.
Jury's still
It's
out.
interesting, but not
Okay.
clear what it is yet.
A, B, or C, Web 2.0?
I think it's a B, and it's going to flop one way or the other.
Ah, okay.
Well, I disagree. I think it's an A, and it's succeeding very rapidly. You should come and look at some of my stuff.
Geir?
It isn't an A yet, but I would say that it is an A. We're very, very hopeful that that can do a lot for us.
Okay, so we've got a lot of, we've got a little bit of vested interest, but we got a lot of Bs going to As. We've got a lot of As, which says to me that you guys are excited about technology, which may be a different thing from a couple of years ago when technology was almost a dirty word for CIOs, right? I mean, nobody wanted to hear you talk about it 2 years ago.
What did they talk about?
Sorry?
What did they talk about?
Doing more with less, remember?
I wasn't here.
So, all right, so let's take virtualization. That seemed high on people's list. What's driving this? Is it energy costs? Is that what's driving the virtualization buzz right now?
Well, I'll start off. I've got one of our business areas that we've got probably 50,000 plus servers in, and their actually utilization is pretty high. It's at 60%, but at 50,000 servers and 40% not utilization missing, that's 20,000 servers that I'm cooling, I'm operating. I need to get that up.
I think initially we drove a lot of it to cost. It's kind of like, how can you do more with less, as you said? But what we're finding is that it all is giving us a hell of a lot more flexibility and agility than we ever had before. And what it comes back is we are now saying, well, we have virtualized our network, we have virtualized our processor, we have virtualized our storage. Now, how do we actually virtualize environments so that we can put environments aside and bring those environments back again when we need them later, when we don't have anything running in that? And for us, that has certain advantages. But I think for other companies, it could maybe have such things as compliance issues, audit issues, and that kind of stuff. And if you could put the environment away, bring it back on whatever that new Intel processor is a few years from now, and I have no complexity in drivers and all that kind of stuff, it has a huge potential.
So that,
Yeah, I think the flexibility is probably the biggest advantage that what it gets you. I think a lot of the, certainly what I'm getting faced with is mostly one of the drivers is driving down cost, power cost, cooling cost, and so on. But in reality, I absolutely agree with that. It's the flexibility that is the advantage.
whereas, do you happen to know off the top of your head what percentage of your IT budget is power costs? Any idea, ballpark even?
Yeah, but we don't talk about that.
Okay.
You need to buy a power plant? I have one. I'll give you. I can give you a good deal on one.
Can you put it where I want it?
Oh yeah, we'll give you one.
All right, so everybody's selling.
we virtualize
Everybody's
that?
selling.
We can virtualize that one, yeah.
So, let's talk about open source for a minute. I mean, that's sort of some people, there's been a lot of action lately, right? Red Hat bought JBoss and Oracle's making noises and all kinds of stuff happening. Where do you see that going? Is there sort of a limit to where that can go? Or does that get really big? You know, how are you going to use it?
I think it's probably limited the same way the internet's limited. It just has tremendous potential for a self-propelled snowball effect that will only be measured by the degree of adoption. We think it's particularly valuable in the resale side because it significantly drives down the cost of delivery to hospital-sized applications. And given the thin margins that exist in healthcare today, where a very healthy hospital might have 1% or 2% at the bottom line, they're increasingly cost-sensitive, and we can deploy much more capability for the same resale dollar amount. So for us, it's about taking third-party cost out.
I think to a large degree, the continued success will be dependent on how much people contribute back to the open source community. I think a lot of the hesitation in recent years has been because of the risks involved with running your key enterprise applications on open source. And I think that a number of open source pieces of software have reached a maturity now where most companies don't hesitate that. I mean, we've obviously, it's pretty well known, we've been contributing back from the very beginning, and we still do it very significantly in a number of different areas. And in the 10 years of the company, we have not had problems running mission-critical application and open source software.
So let me ask, what about the business model of these, poor vendors who are selling open source? I mean, do you care that Red Hat doesn't actually get any money for the software and they have to make all their money for support, or is that a good thing?
No, I think it's interesting. I think it's very interesting that the software industry hasn't necessarily gone into a stoic business model yet, that they actually have this open source as a challenge on the side that actually kind of keeps them a little bit on their toes, if that is Microsoft or if it's Oracle or whoever it is. But I think that the open source has a long way to go, and I think that there are some opportunities that we have not yet seen, where actually we will get more of an open source where it isn't only contributors that like to deal with their specialty area. It could be corporations going out and start sharing, where I might have something that Lars needs, and I say, hey, wait a moment, here's what it is, but there's a forum for that. So there's an open source forum that starts going up, not only in the operating system and the database and in the application layer, but it goes into the more business applications and the way you actually process, and you can find ways to then collaborate across company boundaries on that. There might be some legal challenges at times with it, but other times it might actually also have some advantages.
I think the other thing in the space is if you envision 1 billion PCs a year or 1 billion handheld devices on top of that, and you look at the marketplace spread around the world, there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think maybe the economic model may shift and change, but that's a lot of opportunity if you can take and put software into that space, make money in different ways, and further grow that environment. There's a lot of potential there.
I think the landscape of intellectual property will continue to evolve dramatically. If you look at what the most expensive software used to be, it was the operating system and then the compiler. And if you had a lot of money, you bought a copy of SuperCalc. And today, these things have almost no value. So the price of a piece of software is the value that piece of software represents to an end user. The more successful an application is, the more rapidly it becomes commodity. And many of the applications that are on the market today are really all about producing solutions with very little labor. And those solutions, in and of themselves, are not intellectual property. So when you look at assembling a business process around a collaboration tool, you'll pay a couple of bucks for the collaboration tool per user, and you've created a business process that's worth millions of dollars to your corporation. So I think the whole landscape of what users value will continue to evolve rapidly, and probably most of the money will go to services.
Interesting. Okay. So we're going to take a couple of questions. Before we do, are there any of those technologies that I didn't come back to that you wanted to say something about? Do you remember, I don't know if you remember was there something that you wanted that we didn't cover? Or we covered it? Good. All right. So we should have a couple of mics circulating. While we're getting that mic to the first person, we had some pre-submitted questions, and I'm going to just ask them. How do you make sure your staff is not doing what is easy versus new and untested technologies?
Well, it's a pretty open-ended question. I think that when I take a look at a particular area, I look at the level of performance, but I also look at, can they move their cost model down, delivering a set of capabilities, or are they really matched up well with what the real business needs are, and making sure that that is occurring as well. If they're matched up well, then incrementally drive your cost model down. I don't know that I've seen anyone say, let's do the easy thing. It's usually the other way around. They want to do a more complicated solution. I've got to reel them in.
I mean, we're an engineering company, and I think that people like to do it the hard way rather than the easy way. It's kind of like, how many science projects do I have to kill a year rather than actually do the opposite? So I think it's the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a greater, just a follow-up, do you have a greater tolerance today than you might have 3 years ago for some R&D project that some engineer is off on the side kind of tinkering with?
Yes.
More open to that now?
It's because you don't have the same pressure, so that you can kind of open up the tolerance level a little bit, because earlier you said we have some very clear directions what we need to do right now, so don't do this other stuff. That is just not what we're doing. It's much more open today than it was just 2 years ago.
Huh. Interesting. Do you all agree with that?
We'll tolerate Skunk Works projects if the people involved in it can identify its connection with a strategy that's on our 3 or 4 year roadmap. But again, most of this we solve by putting the plan, the design, the build, and the run functions in separate organizations. We don't tolerate very much innovation in the run function. We tolerate it in the upstream functions that are trying to solve the strategies. But in the end, you're talking about people who pay extra to buy an unassembled bicycle. And if you think you're going to shut down innovation in software engineering, it's just not going to happen. They'll go underground if you don't create a relief valve.
We put a huge emphasis on innovation. I mean, it's a key part of developing our product, and we actually scour the globe for good talent and allow people to work where they want and try to foster innovation.
Do your guys come to you and say the competition lets their engineers spend 20% of their time on whatever they want?
Yeah, that's Saturday.
Sorry? Saturday. Okay, so let's take some questions. I'm going to ask, we'll probably just have one CIO respond to each question unless there's a huge appetite to discuss it, so we can get through as many as we can. Yes?
My question is on relating to virtualization and software licensing. So does software licensing that's generally based on physical server, a physical entity, affect your ability to maximize an economy of scale and actually go from, let's say, 50, 60% utilization to where you want to go?
So this sounds like a question about licensing models, and should it be pegged to CPUs, or how do you prefer that it be done? Was that the question?
Well,
and does
to some
virtualization
degree,
change that?
Licensing is to a specific machine. If you buy a 4 CPU license for Oracle, then you have to run it on a 4 CPU machine. Right. So that makes it difficult to move it or upscale or downscale it to meet your...
So it's how is virtualization going to change licensing?
I think I understood the question. We have a very tough time hearing from the loudspeakers here, but it was about licensing around virtualization, and let me try to kind of answer that with a little bit embellishment around it. First of all, the virtualization saves us hardware. I hate to say that to Intel, but we don't buy as many boxes any longer as we used to do. The second thing is that you get a different utilization, so therefore you don't have to maintain, or the maintenance cost of running X number of machines is much higher than running one, so then you save it. Now when you then come down to the licensing cost, that's probably the next one we have to tackle. We haven't tackled that one yet, because today we have to buy multiple licenses, but in the scheme of things, that is very small compared to the hardware and the cost of running a machine. We ran just from a very low single-digit utilization of machines up to kind of in the 60 to 70% utilization of a machine by virtualization. And that is a tremendous advantage for us.
Huh, interesting. Do we have another question? Yeah, over here.
Yeah, I have a question, especially for John Johnson, regarding the RFID. He mentioned he gave a C to RFID, and I want to understand his thinking, since Intel is so much into the wireless space. Okay.
Why did you give a C to
I
RFID?
gave the answer as an IT manager. If I talk about it as a Intel employee, it has a huge amount of potential in terms of creating sensors that you can bring a lot of data in. Internally, we've used RFID on tagging PCs, tagging assets, that sort of thing, and so it's more of an IT answer more than an Intel answer, frankly. Intel has a lot of interest in this space.
Okay. Do we have another question? Yeah.
Yes, all of you ranked VoIP and A. I was wondering what value you saw that technology adding to each of your respective businesses. Thanks.
What value do you see in voice over IP, since you all rated it highly? What's the biggest benefit, or why do you like it?
Fundamentally, two things. First, it allows us to better integrate global offices, widespread user populations. And secondly, in specific applications like our call centers, for example, if you've ever called 1-800-ASK-A-NURSE, you're probably talking to a McKesson employee on the end across the United States. And in these large call centers, they give an unprecedented ability to deploy advanced features and integration with call management systems, integration with the applications and the scripts that these call center representatives need to do their job effectively. And of course, it's less expensive.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's great. Yeah, over here.
So I was curious, we've heard you in the past talk about security as always one of the chief importances when you think of regulations and other areas. Yet we haven't heard security mentioned at all today. Is there a reason? Are you feeling that you're very comfortable with your security solutions at this point?
So the question was, security hasn't come up at all tonight. Why not? Are we all secure?
I believe that security is kind of a thing like the weather. We all like to kind of talk about it, but we can't do much with it. And I say that kind of a little tongue-in-cheek. And that is that I think we've gotten very good solutions in place, and it's a state. It's a state where we're not looking for an end solution. It's a state where we will constantly be dealing with this, and therefore keeping it on the agenda all the time. I have moved that one down to kind of, it's just one of my necessities that I have to deal with all the time, and it doesn't have many blips. Now, if we go from virus to phishing and there comes whatever new word, maybe it gets a blip again and we will all kind of focus on whatever that new stuff is. But today we deal with it just as a fact of life. I don't know what others do.
No, I agree with that. I think that it's table stakes. You've got to invest necessary amount in security. You've got to keep your environment secure. And whatever faces outwards, you've got to have ways of dealing with the new ways of attacks on an ongoing basis.
But that said, I want to actually, I don't know if anybody cares, but what I do think is that we will change our security model from being kind of this boundary-based to more kind of a flexible business model, security model where an application has to be more secure, because there are too many ways to get into applications today, and if you want to kind of open these up to other people that might not have the same kind of security level, you want to be sure that you tie that closer in. So I think that our models will change, or the architecture of our security will change over time, but I'm not sure that it necessarily will kind of hit kind of the A list of activities.
Okay. Yeah, here.
Excuse me, just one.
Sorry.
If I could direct the panel, we have microphones out on the floor for recording, so if you could direct your attention to those and hold the microphone, greatly appreciate it. We have a gentleman right here who's been waiting.
Okay, so the person with the mic.
Looks like I've got the floor. There's an industry stat that says something like 85% of the success factors for IT implementations are not related to the technology, but to the people that use it. So I've got a question for you guys. Do you agree with that stat? Do you experience that within your environments? And the second question is, to what degree are you devoting your resources to solving that problem? So is it a 10% of your budget that you're directing towards making sure that people are using and adopting the technology? Is it greater? Is it lesser? Is it a big issue for you guys?
So to try to summarize that, this gentleman saying that 85% of the results or outcomes of IT systems have to do more with the end user rather than the technology, and are you spending a proportional amount of your budget on adoption or training or whatever it is so they get the value out of it? Or how do you deal with that?
I think the likelihood of an IT project failing is directly proportional to the connection of that IT system or initiative with a real business problem and a real business partner. Successful IT deployment happens when you're trying to improve a fundamental business process, that you've got the owner of that process at the table, and that IT is simply the enabler or the thing to drive compliance. The change management function around that, the engagement of the business in changing that process or solving that problem is really the indicator of whether it's going to succeed. Can you change your process, not is the IT system successful?
Yeah, it's, if I look at the programs where we've actually had failures or significant slips, it's always tied into that space. And it's typically, in many cases, our business users don't understand the amount of change that they're actually going to drive into the environment.
But it does go back to the Salesforce.com
Exactly.
discussion,
I'm
right?
going back that I think that we, even as corporations, are poor at actually bringing that self-taught application into the environment. You know, I never got the manual for how to get on Yahoo. No, and I didn't get a manual for how to get on Salesforce.com, but I got a manual for how to get on SAP. And I think that that is something we have to work on, is to kind of change these so that they become more viral, they become more intuitive, and they become easier for us to deploy. Internally, I can say that, you know, if you have a project running a little bit over budget, that barely never happens, you know, when you do IT projects, but you do, and the budget that starts then sliding off is the training, right? Because, you know, the total cost is still so much, and if that little demarcation shifts over, the trainings start suffering, or the deployment kind of cost. So I think it's on us to change the way we do some of it as well.
Okay, good. I think we have time for one or two more, so we have one back here, and then we'll wrap up.
So there's a lot of information in the news around data loss, data leakage, pick your vernacular, laptops being stolen, identity theft and whatever. One thing that's interesting is as a vendor, there's a huge amount of interest we find at the lower levels in the IT organizations, yet so many of these projects end up stalling when they go for executive sign-off. So I agree with the fact that security is not a destination, it's a constant process, but you know, why are these projects stalling? A, I should say, you know, is this an A on your radar? B, why are these projects stalling when they reach executive sign-off?
So the question is data leakage an A on your radar, and why are data-related projects stalling?
Well, is this a major issue that's an A on your priority list? B, as a vendor, we're involved in a lot of these projects, yet we see them stalling and actually not getting funded oftentimes at the executive level. What's missing in those requirements that you need to see to fund those projects, or is it simply not a priority?
Why are you guys killing all these projects?
Well, this must be for other CIOs that do that. Because I certainly take data security very seriously and data protection very seriously, yes. Identity management very seriously, and it's partly a reflection of the business that we do on the internet, but also the risk of data loss is very real, and there's been lots of cases of that recently, so we certainly need to make investment in that.
Yeah, I'd add that this is a real-time topic that I'm involved in discussions this year, this month, this week. So particularly where there are data protection issues with either privacy information or really confidential IP information, we really pay a lot of attention to how we protect it.
Okay, we got time for one more. Who has the microphone?
Right. Hi, my name is Harold Rell. I had a quick question regarding, you said many IT projects fail, and I was wondering, in software development today you use a lot of agile process to fix that. Is that something you think is good for the whole IT department?
So can you, we're having a hard time hearing up here. Can you just repeat it a little bit slower?
Yes, I was wondering whether you thought, you think that the agile process would be good for the IT department in terms of getting the business owner into the IT process and increasing the success rates as opposed to using like a waterfall, more traditional IT processes.
Was it Agile program?
Yeah, it sounds
agile,
like it's
yes.
a process, programming process question.
I'll comment first that it's something that we do use internally typically for smaller programs, small to medium programs, where there can be a fairly good connection with the business group folks that have the expertise and are willing to sit and watch the incremental solutions being developed. So it definitely has a place, at least in our IT space.
Yeah, clearly the whirlpool approach rather than the waterfall approach is driving much better results and involving the business more closely with the outcome.
Great. Well, listen, let's have a big round of applause for our panelists. Very well done.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much.
So just as a token of our appreciation, we have for all of our panel and for our moderator a 20th anniversary Churchill Club t-shirt. And I just want to thank, once again, a truly world-class panel. Gentlemen, thank you all. And Dave Margulies, a world-class moderator. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Drive safely, and we'll see you at the next Churchill Club event. Thanks, everyone.